finally happening. I'm going to do my bookshelf tour, and I was so intimidated to make this video. First of all, because I have no idea how to film this because there's just so much to get through. And second of all, my bookshelf has been a mess lately. Like, I used to have a beautifully organized system of like sorting books by genre, and then within the genre there were subgenres, but I've run out of space, so lately I've just been putting the books that I bought like on top of all the other books, and the organization is gone. There's no organization anymore. So I think the best way to go about this is to just show you shelf by shelf what's on there roughly. I just tell you what my idea for that shelf was. I'll show you some books that stand out to me or like special to me. I'm not going to show you each individual book because we'll be here for hours. I think there's like 600 books on my shelves right now. So let's not do that. It'll just be like a general overview of my collection. Even though I'm intimidated, I'm also so excited to film this. Like, bookshelf tours were my life when I was 15, 16. I used to watch all of them during the peak booktube era. It was like 2012 to 2014 or something, when there was like so many American YA booktubers that had these huge walls of bookshelves in their room with all the hardbacks lined up, and that was my dream. These days I actually prefer paperbacks over hardbacks, so I don't have that many, but I do finally have a bookshelf that I can give a tour for. So this is my moment. This is what I've been waiting for since I was 16. So let's get into it. First, a few details about the bookshelf itself, because surprisingly enough, I get quite a few questions asking which one it is. And it's just a classic IKEA Billy. Like, you cannot go wrong with a Billy. It's affordable and it's durable. And they came out with this beautiful new hazelnut wood color. I do really love this color. It's very mid-century, like 70s to me. And that's the reason that I wanted to stick with the Billy this time, because we're still living in a rental apartment. And one day I hope to have a beautiful built-in bookshelf in the wall somewhere. But as long as I'm renting, I'm not gonna do that, obviously. And then I think the Billy is like the best option out there. And this is such an upgrade from the white ones I used to have as a teen. So yeah, I really like them. I have 3 big ones and like 1 smaller one on the side. And then I also have the extensions on top to make it a little bit taller, because our ceilings are very high. They're like 3 meters high, I think. So you need a little bit of length in the bookshelf as well. Otherwise, it just looks so out of place. I think that's everything that you need to know about the bookshelf. So let's get started with the tour. We'll start on the left side here. I just quickly put up my hair because it already got so hot and I haven't even started yet, but it's like 30 degrees outside. And there's a lamp glaring at me right here. So this needed to be done. But let's start at the top left here. This is my shelf with books about Paris. Paris is my all-time favorite city. I went there by myself for a week in like 2021. And that week was transformative for me. Like, the thing that appeals to me most about Paris is the cultural and artistic and literary history. There's just so much that has been created there. And I love reading stories about the bohemian artists that lived in Paris in like the 1920s to the 1950s. It just speaks so much to the imagination, and it's a time that I can completely romanticize. Like, I dream of being that person, like going to Café de Demago to read my book and to have philosophical conversations with other artists over a glass of red wine and smoking. You know, that's the whole dream I have about Paris. So some of the best examples for what I was just talking about with like the artistic bohemian crowd in Paris are Paris on the Brink, Sylvia Beach and the Lost Generation, and Left Bank. Because if you're not familiar with Paris, there's like the right bank of the Seine, the river that runs through the city, and the left bank. And the left bank was generally known for like hosting all the artists. It was like sort of more the poorer neighborhoods. So that's where all these struggling artists went and lived and created. So there's just a lot of history there when it comes to writers like Hemingway and James Joyce. And my favorite book about that was definitely Sylvia Beach and the Lost Generation. Sylvia Beach was an American woman who opened the first English bookstore in Paris called Shakespeare and Company. It's still there. It's not the original one anymore, but the general feeling and atmosphere is definitely still there. And her story is just so incredible and inspiring to me. So if you want to learn more about her, definitely try this book. I highly recommend. Then the shelf below that, we're already getting a little bit into messy territory. It's a little bit of everything, but it's mostly just big hardcovers that I didn't know where else to put, and they looked very nice together, so that's why they're here. But we have Sylvia Plath's biography, we have Just Kids by Patti Smith, the special illustrated edition, we have The Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir, and the photo book by Patti Smith. I have 2 editions of that. And for some reason the Sapiens books are also here because they didn't fit on my non-fiction shelf anymore. These are so heavy, but these give a little bit of a peek into the life of artists, and maybe you're seeing a pattern here, but I just love placing myself into that world. So you probably know Just Kids by Patti Smith, it's very well known, and I have the normal edition also somewhere, so we'll come across that. But then I found this special illustrated edition and I had to get it. It's so stunning. It has more photos, it has like full page photo spreads, it has notes in there, like this one. Like, look at that. That's so stunning, and it really gives an extra dimension to reading the story. So if you're a fan like me and have read this book multiple times, this one, it's definitely worth getting as well. This is a book I randomly ran into on a book market in the Netherlands, and I had actually never heard of it before. But when I read what it was about, I immediately had to get it. This is Nothing is Lost, and they are the collected essays by Ingrid Sishi. And she was one of the most important arts, fashion, photography critics between 1980 and 2015. So these are the essays she wrote about all of these topics. So if you're interested in reading about any type of art, to be honest, and just getting a peek behind the curtains, then this is a really fun one. Then let's go to the shelf with my little globe. This is another random miscellaneous shelf. Here I have my very small collection of graphic novels and illustrated books. I wish I had more graphic novels, but they're just so expensive. So then I usually just end up picking an actual novel because they last longer than a graphic novel as well. You go through them quite quickly. But they're just so beautiful to have. I love flipping through them. And two of my favorite ones are Through the Woods by Emily Carroll, which is a gothic short story collection of graphic novels. And the art is very dark and beautiful. I love this style and I love anything gothic, so this was an easy choice. Another one I really liked is Alison by Lizzie Stewart, which again takes place in the art scene in London in the 1970s, and it follows some bohemian young artists. I just quickly have to show you this one as well. I have the complete Brambley Hedge, and it just brings me so much joy. I cannot even explain. It's just it's the most wholesome thing ever created. So whenever I feel sad, I just sit down with this book with a cup of tea and it heals me. And if I ever have kids, they will have to read this with me over and over and over again. On the right side of the globe, we have some overspill from the literary fiction shelves, which are mostly here. There's nothing really interesting about these books. They're mostly thrifted, I'm noticing. And I have some Sarah Waters here, which is an author I discovered last year, actually. I have seen her books around, but I never knew what they were about, and they just never really appealed to me. I thought they were sort of mother type of books. I don't really know how to explain. But then I randomly picked up Tipping the Velvet, which is a lesbian read about the theater world and music hall world in the late Victorian era. It was one of the most atmospheric books I've ever read, and it completely turned me onto this author. So I have two other books by her now that I still have to read, but I am very excited to read more of her work after this one. Now let's move one shelf down, and all of this is nonfiction, so I try to organize a little bit. And also in the nonfiction, there are some distinctions, but not so much anymore. I think the biggest distinction is here, which are my spiritual witchy books, I would say. And the rest has just become a mix of everything, because there's no way of keeping it organized when I just keep adding new books. I would have to reorganize my whole bookshelf every month, which I'm not gonna do. So let's just go through each shelf and see what I can tell you about it. This shelf is mostly memoirs and essay collections, and I think it holds some of my favorite books of all time. Also because I just love essay collections and memoirs. I love that genre. I love looking at the world through another person's eyes and finding myself in that person, even if their life is so different from mine. I think that's one of the most beautiful things about reading. So yeah, I just gravitate a lot towards that genre. Basically, any book on the shelf is amazing. So take a look at the close-up and you will have some great new recommendations. The shelf below that is still nonfiction, but a little bit more of a mixed bag. There's some scientific nonfiction, there's some collected interviews, there's some books about art and artists, and there's some books about writing. So it really is a little bit of a mix of everything. My favorite book by far on this shelf is Upstream by Mary Oliver, which is also an essay collection. Mary Oliver is mostly a poet, but she also wrote some other stuff, amongst which this essay collection. But her writing is very poetic at all times, and I love her for her connection to nature, how she looks at the world, how she sees the beauty in the simple things. Her way of talking about the world around us really makes me emotional sometimes, because I wish the world was that pure everywhere, you know? That's what I really love about her writing. But surprisingly, this essay collection also talks a lot about making art and writing and feeling that urge to create something and how you have to listen to that call, which to me personally was also very inspiring. Like, I am trying to be a writer, so every uplifting word that I can get, I will take. And this one was definitely very inspiring, so highly recommend. Another one I love to recommend because it's just so surprising is Julie Andrews' autobiography. It's called Home. And I don't know why I picked this up. I think on a random day, I was just like, I want to read an autobiography. And I just Googled some well-rated ones and this one came up. And it has good ratings for a reason because this was so unexpectedly amazing. I read this in like 2 days because I just could not stop. Her life had so many ups and downs and she literally came from nothing and climbed up to be one of the most beloved actresses of all time. She takes you all the way to the moment where Walt Disney discovered her to be the actress for Mary Poppins, and her career obviously took off from there. Like, just tell me what artists do, how they create, how it all works, and you got me. Like, I want to know. I'll be there, I'll be seated. So this one definitely scratched that itch for me. This book had me really hooked from beginning to end. I really think this video is going to take like 4 hours to film. I don't know how long I've been talking so far, but I'm a little bit scared. We're not even halfway yet, so we gotta keep going, guys. There's no time to pause. This little shelf here contains miscellaneous nonfiction, but I just put the hardbacks together. That is literally the reason why they're all here together. Surprisingly enough, this shelf also contains a lot of books I have not actually read yet. I think sometimes I'm just drawn in by a pretty book and then it just disappears on my shelf. But all of them I'm actually quite interested in, so I'm just going to keep them on there and wait for the right moment to start them. Like, sometimes you just have to wait until a book calls to you. I don't know how it works, but I like to believe that it's a little bit magical, like my books are talking to me. And one of the books that actually happened with is this one on the shelf below. It's Women Who Run with the Wolves. I talk about this book a lot because it's one of my favorites of all time. But yeah, I had this on my shelf for quite a few years and I always felt extremely intimidated by it because it's over 500 pages. It's dense, it's not like a fun read, like it's not easy to get through. But one day I was like, you know what? I think I have to start this book now. And it turned out to be the best thing ever for that moment because I was going through it. I was going through a heartbreak. I was kind of like lost in life. And this book just gave me so much perspective and inspiration and made me look at womanhood in a completely different way. And it sort of spurred a lot of other interests as well. So I'll be forever grateful to this book for that. This has some books on witchcraft, some books on spirituality. Like, for instance, I have my tarot card book here. Like, whenever I'm reading cards, I use this book to look up what the cards mean because I still don't know that by heart. I have my moon spells book, which was definitely a cover buy. It looks so good, but it's also just really interesting to learn more about the moon phases and how you can tune in to each specific phase to, you know, feel your best. So those are the type of books I have on here. A favorite one is one that I got for Christmas last year, which is the Wheel of the Year. It's so beautiful. It's an illustrated guide to nature's rhythm. It just gives you the meaning of every celebration of each season. It's just such a fun way to engage more deeply with the passing of time and the passing of the seasons. Then, of course, I have 2 of the books in the Library of Esoterica series from Taschen, the publisher. These books are so heavy. They're also absolutely stunning. I wish I had the whole collection. Look at that. That's so stunning. And these are essentially art books. They show art pieces about certain branches of esoterica. These books are a little bit more pricey, I would say, but they are definitely worth the money because the attention of detail and the love that goes into creating these is unmatched. So that was it for nonfiction. Now we're moving into the shelf here, which is the lowest you can see right now. Here is where my horror collection starts and actually goes around the corner. So I have quite a lot of horror books. I think it's one of my favorite genres as well. Not really like the gory horror. I also absolutely don't love horror movies, but just the eerie, uncanny, like creeping sense of dread type of books. So I have a lot of short story collections when it comes to horror. I have a lot of folk horror. I really enjoy horror books where nature plays a role and like nature is sort of like the evil in the story. I don't know why, but they fascinate me. And I think one of my favorite books on this shelf has to be Slowfoot by Bram. It was just the cover that drew me in because it's so stunning. He's a writer who also illustrates, so all of his books have both his writing and his illustrations, and they are stunning. They are so dark and creepy. This was so good. This is what I want horror to be. Also with the imagery, it just made it so much more vivid. It is very, very gory and bloody. Like, some things were extremely hard to read, and that holds for all of his books because this book started another obsession. Yes, I have 3 books by him now, but I want to have each and every one of them. I have Lost Gods, which I actually haven't read yet, and The Child Thief. We're focusing again on the lamp, okay. The Child Thief, which is a dark retelling of Peter Pan. Again, so violent and bloody, and like the bodily horror that is in these books, like it's intense. It's not for the faint-hearted. But the atmosphere is absolutely great, the writing is great, the illustrations are stunning. So if you're looking for a good horror author, definitely give Brom a try. I also have some more literary horror on here. I would say that most of my horror collection is actually literary horror. So it's not outright scary, it's just more a little bit creepy and unsettling, and just uses horror to describe the human emotions we go through and the horrors of daily life. So a really good one for that is Monstudio, which is about a woman who loses her young son to a lung disease, and from a piece of his lung she grows a new son who turns out to be somewhat of a monster. And Thirst is a literary vampire novel. It's very melancholy. I am so drawn to vampires, I can never resist them, so it's nice that there's also some like new and original takes to them in literary fiction, so I really enjoyed this too. Another subgenre of horror that I really enjoy is like medieval religious horror. I also have another one on the other shelf, but I'll just grab it already. This is Between Two Fires by Christopher Bullman, I think. And this is Hollow by B. Cadling. When I was young, I read a book about a girl who travels to time back to the Middle Ages in the time of the plague. And that book made such a deep impression on me. It really ingrained the Middle Ages into my brain as a really dark and scary time, really disgusting. There was a lot of body horror, and religion played such a big role to justify like huge crimes and the way of living there. And I think it just made a really big impression on me because still to this day I can really feel how that book made me feel. And I think it's also what makes me feel drawn to books like this. When there's a horror book that depicts these kind of things, I'm always intrigued, like I always want to read them. So these are 2 that I definitely recommend. This one is a little bit more readable. This one is extremely weird, but the atmosphere was there. Welcome to my floor. This was the part that I was a little bit worried about because I was like, how am I gonna film the lower shelves? But we're just gonna sit on the floor together. So on this side, I have the Harry Potter books. You know, they're my old books. They're there. My very, very small romance section, but the ones I have here are 3 Emily Henry books and The Wedding People by Alison Aspect, which is a book I really enjoyed. If you want a nice summer read, I definitely recommend this one. If you want to hear me talk about it more, you can watch my romance book video that maybe I can link somewhere. And now we can get into the fantasy. I have a pile of mass market paperbacks here. They're kind of like a mixed bag, but because they're all the same size, I just wanted to keep them together to keep the bookshelf look a little bit organized because they're so tiny. So I definitely have a few favorites here. I have the Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson, which is one of my favorite fantasy series of all time. I have The Night Circus, and I have In the Company of Witches. This is a cozy fancy, and my TikTok in which I talk about this book became one of my most viral videos of all time. I described this book in the video as a Gilmore Girls meets Practical Magic, and now that I've read many more, as you will soon see, I wouldn't say that this is my favorite in the genre anymore, but it was still really, really enjoyable, really fun, really cute. So I still recommend this series. There's 2 books in the series, and unfortunately I think they're not gonna ever publish the 3rd one. But yeah, whenever I see this book, I just remember the time I got like millions of views talking about this book, which was fun. We continue into the cozy fantasy. This is all cozy fantasy. Yeah, my collection is expanding rapidly. There's a lot of them now, and as you may know, I'm also writing a cozy fantasy because it's just a genre I enjoy a lot, and this is sometimes a little bit like confusing to explain my book taste to people because I really enjoy nonfiction. I enjoy like a very heavy literary fiction, but I also enjoy reading about witches eating cinnamon rolls. Like, I don't know, I like everything. It just depends on my mood. So when I started my cozy fantasy, I just wanted to write something happy, like something that brought me a lot of joy. And I wanted to create a world that I wanted to live in. And that's just what cozy fantasy does to me. And that's what a lot of these books also did for me. So let me tell you about some of my favorites. I think one of my favorite discoveries in the genre is Sarah Edison Allen. Like these books are relatively old, they're from like 2005 or something. And I would describe her books as Hallmark movies, but if they had like magic in them. And this is Garden Spells. I love this cover so much. Look at that. And if you love the practical magic movie, you will love this book because this book gives everything of the movie that the actual book Practical Magic does not give. And funnily enough, the book Garden Spells is much more similar to the movie in like atmosphere, but even storyline, I would say. But yeah, this was just perfectly cozy, whimsical, and fun. Of course, I think one of the best in the genre is The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. I actually also bought the Italian edition recently because I thought what better way to learn Italian than reading a book I already know the story of, so I don't have to like be completely in the dark and I just can compare the two so I can directly translate and look up the words that I don't understand. I've read like 2 pages so far of the Italian one, so I haven't come very far yet, but you know, it's fun to have. And the Italian copy is actually really, really cute as well. Another favorite of mine is Cackle by Rachel Harrison, because this one doesn't center a romantic storyline, but actually a friendship storyline, which is something I really enjoyed. And also is like a little more creepy than your average cozy fantasy. Like there were some moments in this book that got like a little uncanny, and I do like it when cozy fantasy takes a little bit of a darker turn. Like with the movie Practical Magic, there's like murder and death in there, and somehow it still manages to be super whimsical and cozy, and I think Cackle does that really well as well. In the corner here, you may have noticed that I have some books that are turned around, and that's just because the covers are so goddamn ugly and colorful. It's the Court of Thorns and Roses series by Sarah J Maas, but look, they're so fluorescent. I don't know who signed off on this, but it's so ugly I cannot accept it, so I have to turn those around so I don't have to look at them. Then we move one shelf up and we get into a more miscellaneous shelf of fantasy. There's one sci-fi book on here. It's The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But other than that, I have no sci-fi. It's a genre I don't enjoy at all. Mostly because I don't like technology. I don't like reading about it. So most sci-fi immediately gets a no from me. But I do love The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy solely because of the British sense of humor. That's like really elite. Other than that, we have some favorites on here. Circe, Ninth House, The Will of the Many. I think these were all 5-star reads for me. We have my boyfriend's Italian Aragon series, and I have The Ordinary Monsters and the second book, Bringer of Dust. These covers are some of my favorites of all time. Look at that. So stunning. Like if I wrote a little bit more of a darker witchy novel than cozy, I would want something like this to be the cover. I love this color purple. It's stunning. So stunning. The fantasy continues on these 2 shelves. On the bottom shelf, I don't have a lot of favorites. It's kind of like a shelf of failures, I would say. The only book I really, really loved was Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. I don't even know if this counts as a fantasy, but I just put it there because I have her other book here, which is definitely a fantasy. But this was so stunning. I would recommend going into this completely blank, like not knowing what it's about, because at the beginning you're going to be so confused and like have no idea what's going on, but it will all make sense at some point, and it's one of the most original, tender, imaginative books I've ever read. It's a piece of art. I did really enjoy Jonathan Strange and Mr. Moreau as well, but it was so long. Like I was constantly hating this book while I was reading it, but I also started missing it when I was not reading it. So this had me in like a chokehold, but I don't know if I enjoyed the experience. I have a very weird relationship with this book. We have the Throne of Glass series. I definitely ate the series up as a teenager. Like it was everything I ever wanted in like a high fantasy young adult. I know it's not officially young adults, but it feels that way to me. So this has just a lot of nostalgic value to me. And then I have a few books that I did not enjoy at all, so I'll probably get rid of them at some point. We have Babel, we have Blood over Brighthaven, we have The Moonlight Market. I think Babel and Blood over Brighthaven are gonna like shock people the most because they were very, very popular, but they were too preachy for me in the political aspect. It was a little bit too on the nose for me. And I do like it when fantasy is a little bit more subtle with those parallels with the real world. And yet these 2 did not place a lot of trust in the reader to be able to think for themselves. So did not enjoy those. Then the shelf up there, we do have a lot of favorites. We have The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, which is probably my all-time favorite fantasy series, if I had to pick one, which is devastating because the 3rd book is still not there after years and years and years. So I'm just out here suffering, you know? We have One Dark Window. Then we have a lot of Robin Hobb books. I kind of got into her books in a funny way because a friend of mine was reading a series by her and she was like, you have to read it, you're gonna love it so much, it's truly amazing. So I started it per her recommendation and it was A Fool's Assassin. But as I was reading it, I was a little bit confused because they kept referencing events and characters I had never heard of. And I was like, okay, maybe it will become clear at some point. But it did not really, and I still finished the series, had a great time. But later it turned out it's actually the follow-up series to The Assassin's Apprentice by her. So I got massively spoiled for that series, which is like the original one you're supposed to read first. But yeah, after that I decided to read The Assassin's Apprentice anyway because I love the series so much. But I've only read the first book and that one so far. I have to continue at some point, but so many books, so little time and all that. And that was it for the fantasy. I have less fantasy books than I thought I did, but also like I rotate quite quickly through my books. Like if my bookshelf gets too full, I just take out a few books that I didn't enjoy and like sell them or donate them. And I did a massive clear out last year when I moved to Italy because I had to move all of my books. So I just got rid of like over 100 books, I think. So that's probably why my collection has shrunk down a little. Now let's move up to this shelf, which holds the rest of my horror books. And there's just so many favorites on here. Actually, one of my favorite books of all time, like even outside horror, this is one of my favorite books. It's Our Share of Nights by Mariana Enriquez. She is such an amazing horror writer, but she mostly writes short stories, and I am not a really big short story fan because it just takes me a while to get into a story usually and like connect to the characters. And with short stories, you don't really get that time and you have to get into a story over and over and over again. And sometimes I don't really have the energy or like the focus to do that. So I would rather return to a longer story with characters that I'm familiar with. And Mariana Enriquez is also a master at writing longer stories. That is definitely what this book has proven to me. It is so good. In short, this book is about a father and a son, and the father is an unwilling part of a cult that worships darkness, and he is like the conduit for darkness because he has like a special ability. And his father has one goal in his life, and that is to protect his son from this cult and from befalling the same fate. But to describe it like this really does not do justice to this story. It is so extremely layered, and reading this book really felt for me like staring at like a fucked up window and you cannot really make out what's inside. Everything is very unclear, very confusing, but then the fog lifts a little by little and it becomes more and more clear what is going on, and towards the end you're like, oh, this is what I've been looking at the whole time. This is just one of the most haunting books I've ever read. It's so unsettling and heartbreaking. It toys with a lot of moral questions, and yeah, I don't know, you just have to experience it. Like definitely give this book a read because you will not regret it. Another favorite on here is Salt Slow by Julia Armfield, which is a short story collection, but one that I really enjoyed. The back actually describes it better than I could. So Julia Armfield explores bodies and the bodily, mapping the skin and bones of her characters through their experiences of isolation, obsession, love, and revenge. And I think the stories about like girlhood and teenagehood grabbed me the most because that was such a horror of a time for me. So being able to understand these themes and that time more through the lens of an actual horror novel, like really just makes so much sense to me, and it does it for me every time. Another one I would like to recommend is The Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Khaw. I don't really like this cover, it feels a little too like gimmicky, photoshoppy to me. But the writing in this was gorgeous. And this is a very loose horror retelling of The Little Mermaid. And in this version, the Little Mermaid actually eats the prince, and the book starts after that happens. And I think an important theme in this book is like the bodily autonomy of women, but then like through the story of this bloodthirsty mermaid. I just had a little lunch break, so I have fresh energy to do the last few shelves, and we are back standing up, which makes things a little bit easier. And we are finally moving into literary fiction. I just call everything that's not like fantasy, non-fiction, or romance, I just call that literary fiction, which is probably not accurate. So maybe some of these books are not literary fiction, but they're out here. They're out here together. But let's start with the shelf. And this shelf has like a dark academia section on this side, where I have a lot of favorites because it's a genre I really enjoy. Like it's not fully accurate because A Little Life is in here, which is not dark academia at all. But I would say my favorite in this genre, aside from The Secret History, which I don't want to talk about because it feels so boring, everyone talks about it. But it's These Violent Delights by Mika Nemerever, which has the same atmosphere as The Secret History, I would say. It's about two college guys who fall in love, and together they descend into madness until they commit an unspeakable act. And the writing in this was gorgeous. It had so many like hard-hitting lines that I had to underline. Just the way these guys influence each other in the worst way possible was so realistically done, and it really feels like a slow descent into madness when suddenly you're in a situation where you're like, how did we get to this point? That's really how this book felt. And yeah, it's really good and highly underrated. Another underrated dark academia is Beasts by Joyce Carol Oates. The cover, amazing. It's a really short book and it takes place at a college where all of the girls are obsessed with their poetry professor. And every year he takes on like an assistant or like a prodigy, and that student can work at his house where also his wife lives, and they have like this very intriguing bohemian party lifestyle. The protagonist Jillian of this book is picked by this professor to be his assistant, but then it turns out it's not all that she hoped it would be, and she's actually descending into some kind of hell. There's a lot of other favorites on here. Biography of X by Catherine Lacey, The End of Loneliness by Benedict Wells, Northwoods by Daniel Mason, Fame by Anne-Marie MacDonald. Such a unique and underrated read. Like I never see it anywhere, but it was masterful. Pachinko by Minjin Lee, and also my current read, Colony by Annika Norlin. I'm really enjoying this one. It's a really gripping portrayal of contemporary society and the alternative ways to live, like in touch with nature, and what are the advantages and like disadvantages of that, and really good so far. Also on the shelf, I have one of my most unique books, I think. This is a book within a book, and it's very interactive, and it's written by two film directors, I think, which kind of explains why it is the way it is. So you have this outside cover, and then you take out the book, and this is like the book that the story is about. So you have the main book with the story in there. Like, oh, there's stuff falling out. So this is the story. But then the actual story that you want to read is in the margins. And it's a conversation between two students that found this book in the library, and they keep like putting it back so the other can reply to their notes in the margin. And they have a full conversation about this library book and the mysterious identity of the author, because no one knows who this author is. And these two students vow to find out. It's a mystery novel, but it's a mystery that you are involved in as a reader, because there's all these clues in there. Like there's postcards, there's letters, there's things written on napkins, there's business cards, there's university notes. Like this is honestly one of the coolest books I have. Oh, here's the napkin. Like there's an actual napkin in there. It's amazing. Let's move to the shelf above that, which is my female rage / horrors of girlhood shelf. Like not all of the books on the shelf fall into this category, but all the books that do fall into this category are on the shelf, if that makes sense. So with that genre, I mean books like My Dark Vanessa, A Girl's a Whole-Formed Thing, The Book of X, Bunny, what else? The Virgin Suicides. Like those are kind of what embody that genre of like girlhood, womanhood, and all the pain and rage and trauma and horror that comes with it. And some favorites on the shelf are definitely The Virgin Suicides, Bunny by Mona Awad. What else? I really enjoyed Riders and Lovers as well, but it's been a while since I read it, so I might have to reread it to see if it still holds up. This is by Lily King. I think she's actually coming out with another book very soon, so I'm very excited about that. But yeah, this was about a girl who was like in her 20s or early 30s, very lost. She was supposed to become a writer, but then her mother passed away, and then she has no like energy or passion left for that dream. She really has to find her own way again after that and like find her voice again. And I think there's also like a love triangle. I don't really remember, but it was really fun. Then the shelf on the top here holds one of my other favorite shop genres that I invented. I call it sad European summer in the 19th century. It's more about the atmosphere, like a slow, languid summer. There's a lot of melancholy, a lot of nostalgia. I think that's more the overall idea. So some good examples for that are Call Me By Your Name, of course. What else do I have here? The Offing by Benjamin Myers, Swimming in the Dark by Thomas Jodorowsky, Lie With Me by Philippe Basson, and my most recent acquirement, I haven't started it yet, is Open Heaven by Sean Hewitt. It says, on the cusp of adulthood, James dreams of another life far away from his small village. As he contends with the expectations of his family, his burgeoning desire, an ache for autonomy, tenderness, and sex, threatens to unravel his shy exterior. Then he meets Luke, And as the end of summer nears, he has a choice to make. Will he risk everything for the possibility of love? Like, that is exactly what this genre is all about. So I'm really excited to get to this, and I have to read it before summer ends because, you know, you have to read these books in summer. There's no other way. I also have the Napolitan Quartet on here by Elena Ferrante, which completely took over my life in the past few months. I've talked about it in so many YouTube videos, so I won't again, but this is where they are. Is there anything else on here that's interesting? This is a limited edition of Angela Carter's Book of Wayward Girls and Wicked Women. And I think this is a story collection that she edited. So it's by different authors and she just collected the stories. I have not read all of these stories yet, but the edition is so stunning. I just had to have this. This artwork is made by an Italian artist called Andrea Zanatelli. And I know him because he also makes a lot of art for Florence Welch from Florence and the Machine. So I already followed him on Instagram, and then I saw this limited edition came out and I had to have it. So that's the story behind this book. I also have the 2 extended shelves up here that you cannot currently see, so we're gonna move to those later. Here I have some random books that I have just added here because they didn't fit anymore. There's a Dutch children book in here. The rest is literary fiction. I think my favorite one of this is Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. This was so good. I read this a few weeks ago or like a few months ago, and it's definitely worth all the hype. This is just one of those books you have to go in blind because it was very strange, but in the best way. And the ending was such a fever dream and so shocking that I just had to sit and stare and think about it for a long time. And then I went really deep into all the Reddit forums. And I love it when books do that. When they just linger for so long afterwards, that means it was a good read. And this one lingered a long time. Then we go into the classics. This is all classics here. So these are books that everyone knows mostly. And I do have a few special editions on here, but I think I talked about all of those already in my bookshelf setup video, which I made last year. So I don't want to talk about those again because that's not really fun. But I can show you a few of my favorite classics on here. And I think most of them actually are in this Penguin Modern Classics category, like in these blue editions that they have. So they're usually all written in like the 20th and the 21st century, I would say. So these are the Modern Classics editions. I have a lot of Clarice Lispector here. I discovered her last year with Agua Viva, and her writing style is amazing. I was immediately obsessed. It's very vivid, it's very stream of consciousness. It almost feels like reading a dream. And Agua Viva specifically really spoke to me in all the themes and like ideas she touches upon. It feels very much like a spiritual opening to me. Like, I don't know if that was the idea, but for me, it did feel like that. I love Perfume by Patrick Süskind. Shirley Jackson's We Have Always Lived in a Castle, one of my favorite books of all time. It is the perfect mix between that uncanny atmosphere, like commentary on human emotions, great twist, and yeah, her writing is just amazing. I also have her short story collection, The Lottery and Other Stories. I haven't read all of them yet, but what I've read is also great. Like, she's an amazing writer. I also have Mary Gaitskill's Bad Behavior, which is a short story collection of desire and dislocation in 1980s New York. This was also great. So yeah, lots of favorites here in the Penguin Modern Classics. So I think I'm just gonna look up soon what else they have in this series, because so far everything is kind of like hitting for me. 2 gothic favorites on here are Carmilla by Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu, which is the original vampire novel, but this is a lesbian vampire novel. It was actually a cautionary tale against lesbianism, but of course with the years the queer community has claimed this as their own, and now it's sort of like a lesbian iconic book, and it is iconic. Also, the uncensored edition of The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. One of my favorite stories just for the sense of humor that's in there. Oscar Wilde has a great sense of humor, the commentary on society, the gothic atmosphere, and also the commentary on like human nature and our deepest, darkest desires. I love everything about this book. And then here on the bottom we have our last classic shelf. There's just a lot of typical classics on here. We have some Charlotte Bronte, we have some Dostoevsky, we have Lolita, we have Swan's Way, we have The Count of Monte Cristo. I actually read this finally at the beginning of this year, and I flew through it. I did like a read along on Instagram, but I went too fast for my own read along. No one could keep up because I was just having such a great time. And this book is 1200 pages. So you would expect for this to take you like at least a year to finish, but no, it's written in such a way that you cannot stop. And it makes sense because back when this first came out, it was actually published in installments in the newspaper. So every week there would be a new part of the story. So obviously every little fragment had to like be interesting enough for readers to want to pick it up again the week after. So this is constantly entertaining and yeah, so worth the read. I'm so glad I read it. I have some beautiful Barnes & Noble leather-bound classics on here. I think this is my favorite one, The Phantom of the Opera. Looks so gorgeous and gothic as well. Absolutely stunning. And then I have a few of the small numbered modern classics. I don't really know what the series is called, but it's these tiny ones they have. And I think my favorite of this one is Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke. This was so inspiring as someone who read this in their 20s who also wanted to be an artist. Like, it's very calming and sort of like as if an elderly grandfather is like talking to you and like telling you everything is going to be okay. That's how this book felt. Another favorite is Only Dull People Are Brilliant at Breakfast by Oscar Wilde, which is a collection of his most iconic and hilarious quotes. So if you like his sense of humor like I do, like you have to have this book. It's just so funny. So these are fun, like these are such quick reads to get through, and it's a great introduction usually to some of the more classic authors that you might be intimidated by. I think that's it for the classics. So let's move on to the last two top shelves and then we're done. Oh my god, I filmed for so long. Okay, this angle is not great, but it's the only way you can see all the way up there. I actually have a very hard time reaching up there too, as you can see. It's not so easy. I really need some like stairs or something, or like a little bench, but I haven't found the perfect one yet. But yeah, these are the top shelves. Because they're so high up, it's a little bit of a random selection. Like there's just some books that I have already read and don't need to reach for again, or just books I'm not interested in at the moment. These are just here all together because they're tiny and they made like a nice pile. Like there's no system whatsoever. I did try to make a little bit of a historical fiction area up here. So all of this is some sort of like historical fiction, but then all throughout here there's also some historical books spread throughout. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense. I think the ones I would recommend the most from up here are Square of Sevens by Laura Shepard Robinson, which is a historical mystery fiction, I would say. It had so many crazy plot twists. Like what drew me to that book, I'll just get it so you can see. Here it is. What drew me to this book was that there was an element of like tarot card reading. Like the protagonist grew up in a traveling or sort of like circus family, and she learned how to read the tarot cards. And I think it takes place in like the 17th century. But yeah, this one was crazy. It had me on the edge of my seat until the very end. And then after this, like I think I finished the last page while I was in bed, like ready to sleep. I couldn't sleep for hours because I was just so full of adrenaline of the crazy like plot twist at the end. So if you like a read with some good plot twists, definitely try this one. Another one I really enjoyed is Utopia Avenue by David Mitchell. If you liked the TV show Daisy Jones and the Six, but didn't really like the book like me because I thought the book was just not that greatly written, I think you might really like this one because it's the same sort of energy. It also takes place in the 1970s, follows a group of friends that start a band and like slowly become more successful, but they all each have their individual struggles as well, and you read all of their perspectives. And yeah, it's been a few years, so I don't really remember everything about it, but the atmosphere was just so great. It was very much like the rock and roll in the 70s in New York, or was it London? Oh yeah, it's London. Okay, let's go to the last shelf, which is my historical fiction shelf. There's mostly a lot of Ken Follett up here. I used to only own Pillars of the Earth, which I thought was really great. I loved that book and I flew through it, even for how big it was. And then I recommended it to my boyfriend. He loved it too, but he decided to continue with the series because it's a series, and he became obsessed. So we now have the whole Ken Follett series over here. This is the Ken Follett corner. Then here we have some other historical fiction, and then on the right I have my Persephone books. There's a publisher in England called Persephone Books, and they republish forgotten female authors. So authors that wrote books in mostly the 20th century that had been taken out of print. They, find them and republish them in these Gorgeous, great editions, and there's some gems in there. And my favorite find is Dorothy Whipple, which has become one of my favorite. Like, she wrote a lot about day-to-day life in the time she grew up in, like very focused on the families and like small moments. And they're just so good. There's just a lot of like human grief, human drama in there, but in the best way possible. It felt like a little bit like Bridgerton, but more serious and more realistic, because obviously it was not historical fiction. It was just fiction for her because she actually lived in that time. So if you want to check out a new female author with some great historical human drama reads, then I would definitely say Dorothy Whipple, because I love her. So that was it for the bookshelves. I do have a lot of other books spread around my house, like mostly art books, photography books, and like interior design books. And I also have my poetry collection under my TV. But I do think this video is long enough as it is, so I think I will leave those for another time. I would love to make a video about my art book sometime, or about my poetry collection. If you're interested, let me know. But I do hope you enjoyed this video and that you have a better idea of my book collection. Let me know if you found any new recommendations, or if you would recommend me any books based on what you've seen. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye! Oh my god.